does Billy Maximoff want at the end of the road? There's two of you! You're after Toby!
Tommy.
So we got Billy Maximoff in the MCU adding yet another Young Avenger to the roster. And this is fantastic. I love the reveal they did, showing us the backstory in Agatha All Along episode 6, just giving us everything that happened to the moment of him chucking them into mud. Because this was filled with so much lore, so many details, and honestly explained so much stuff that's happened in the last 6 episodes. And also, everything is connected. So that was pretty cool. So in this video, we're going to break down the episode, talk about Wiccan's origin, what they changed, how they kind of stayed true to it, as well as talking about Speed, the Young Avengers, and then Easter eggs and references that happened during this episode. So let's start off with William Kaplan and his Jewish heritage. And that's the thing, in the comics, he is Jewish, and that was one of the things a lot of people were worried for, is that this character was not going to resemble that, and that it was just going to be Billy Maximoff and not going the William Kaplan route. But they went the William Kaplan route, and I think a lot of people are going to be happy about that. And I also love how they tied into, he's just a normal kid having his bar mitzvah, at least I think that's what's happening in this part, and he's having a good time with his family. It's just a joyous occasion. And then he runs into Lilia, out of all the people, doing palm reading, which it's looking like after this episode, it was Billy's fate to be in the coven, because they showed that he's supposed to be in the coven because he's the Black Heart. Because when his boyfriend was texting him, he said, "You're my," and put a black heart there. All leading back into the beginning of the season where we saw Lilia write out the coven on a piece of paper. Now, we could see this as Billy manipulating things, but I think this is fate. How he was watching all the witches and met all of them at different occasions just for them to all come together for the same coven. Except Rio. The only person we haven't seen is Rio yet, but that's because she's most likely not part of the coven, and it was all a misdirect from the very beginning to show that the Black Heart was supposed to be real when it really wasn't. Back to the palm readings, Lily is talking to him about how he's gonna have a long journey ahead of him, a great transformation, and how his lifeline is broken in two, which I saw it as William Kaplan and Billy Maximoff, the two souls from his body. Now, in this moment, I totally thought that both souls were already there, because when we see him in his reflection, we do see his other self after the accident, where it's Billy Maximoff, whereas before, William Kaplan was dressed completely differently. And when Lilia says powers reversed, that's a tarot card. That means that there's a resistance to personal transformation, which in this episode, he does transform. He goes from William Kaplan to Billy Maximoff. Now, probably the biggest mystery they have right now after this episode is that Lilia was the one drawing the sigil. Now, I'm thinking that this could have been Billy's soul controlling her to do that, because he knew what was coming in whatever dimension he was in at the time, the in-between worlds, wherever his soul was when the hex was coming down, that he was controlling fate. Or at least someone was controlling fate in some way, where events were going to happen, they knew they were going to happen, and they set it up so Billy's soul was able to take over the vessel. And I loved how it all kind of tied into the Westview incident, where Westview was happening, and it made everyone go home to their homes in Eastview. The radio was playing WandaVision's TV series. That was pretty cool, little nice reference to that series. And then when they got into the car wreckage, William died, and Billy's soul took over his body. And like Agatha says at the end of the episode,
Saw an opportunity, an empty vessel, and you moved in.
and I love how they tie into it when he comes to, because he yells out Tommy's name. At this point in time is when the hex was coming down, and Billy and Tommy were getting erased. And this is where another connection comes to the coven, is where we meet Alice, who is an Eastview cop. So it all ties into everything that's been going on. He has been connected to this coven from the day the hex came down. When he's finally out of the hospital as well, he can hear his parents' minds, because in the comics, Billy's powers allow him to read minds. Now in the comics, the way he was reborn is that his soul was born into Billy Kaplan, the eldest of 3 sons. So in this, of course, they didn't have 3 sons. He wasn't born, but it was more of his soul taking over the body. I wouldn't say this is a big major change that we have to worry about. I think it kind of fits with the story, what they changed from the comics already, and it kind of slides in nicely. The only kind of confusing part that most people are going to question is the fact that Billy and Tommy were young kids, and then they're going to be teenagers now. The way they kind of show this is as he goes into William's body, he doesn't remember anything. So at this point in time in his life, he is a teenager, so it's not really him. They just pretty much aged him up. And I can't wait to see more of him now after this episode, because I just want to see how he interacts with everyone now that the truth has come out. Now, I do like how the dog was the first one to notice that he wasn't the same person, barking at him right away, not recognizing him, kind of tying into how animals have more of a sense for who people are, and that some minor changes that normal people wouldn't notice, animals pick up on right away. And one of the cool kind of details they had in this episode too is after he goes to his room, the William Kaplan character, his room was already filled with magical stories. He was already kind of tied to that magical world in a sense, because he had like the Wizard of Oz with the Wicked Witch of the West figures and the poster for the Wizard of Oz. He had an Alice in Wonderland poster, a Mystic Rock poster which I don't exactly know what that is. I just went with the mystic part for magic. He also has the Black Cauldron poster, Houdini, so it's kind of like all tied to this mystical adventure. And then when they do the time jump for the 3 years later after this incident, we still have Billy trying to figure out his powers as he can read his boyfriend's mind. And I thought that was interesting because it shows in this moment that he's still trying to figure out what he can do, which at this moment, he still doesn't really know what he can do by the end of this episode, because it looks like after last episode, that was kind of a fluke. He was in an emotional state. Like Agatha said, he was having a tantrum. It doesn't look like he can activate him normally yet, and I feel like that's going to be by the end of the series where he does kind of figure out how to do that, especially when he needs to. And I like how when he's telling his boyfriend about the accident that he had 3 years ago, he talks about how he doesn't have any of the memories, showing that he's a new person. This is his fresh start as Billy Maximoff in this new world. He doesn't have a family, he has people who cares about him, but he wants to find out who he is. But now when they go into his room again, his room is filled with mystical items, runes, drawings, horror films, witchcraft, and like they have a Saw poster, a Craft poster, a Carrie poster, so he's more into that like horror, gothy kind of vibe. Well, you can kind of see it on his look too. He's more into that more darker side of stuff, where 3 years ago, he felt more like a kid into these grand magical adventures, and now it's more into the dark and gritty stuff. Editor Antonio here. What I didn't notice before, but someone pointed out, was that all of his research just on the floor is what we've been seeing in the credits. But this episode was just filled with so many details, like when they're going over the Westview incident with the hex and the red dome. When they first turn on the computer, we see a Jen Kale video, again, connecting him to the Coven, just in a different way from the other two. He's the one that noticed the runes on the hex, and he knew that there was witchcraft involved in all of this, which he seems to be the one person we've met so far that ties back into WandaVision that's been looking at all this magical stuff and understanding what has been going on. And then of course, they just had to bring back the meme character from WandaVision, the one we all thought was going to be Quicksilver.
You must be Bonerific 69.
They brought back Ralph frickin' Boner. I never thought we'd see him again. I thought Evan Peters would have only been in WandaVision and then that was it. But he came back. And now he's messed up. He's a little roughed up after that. And I think it's kind of funny because he's the one that he remembers everything. He's not like the people in Westview where they're just living their lives and they're just kind of going on with everything. He's focused on the magical witchcraft. He remembers all of Wanda's sitcom, how she controlled all of them. Then when he has to talk about Agatha, he freaks out because Agatha did the worst. She took his home. She pretended to be his wife. She controlled him, made him kill a freaking dog. And it's just like all these very dark things that came out of the series that he was used as a puppet. And he's the only person that's being shown those like psychological problems that he had to go through with all of this, which I feel bad for him. He might be a joke, but I feel bad for him because his life took a turn for the worse after all of this. And he even mentions that he held someone hostage, which was Monica Rambeau in that series. So cool to hear all these references about his kind of point of view of after everything happened. And it's funny because on him, he's wearing all these little pieces and like has bones on him, little runes on him to try to ward off witchcraft. Which is kind of like when you look at the people with like, when people try to hide from aliens and everything like that, or spirits. It's different, but I think it's a lot of fun to have this one character who's terrified and trying to hide as best he can from all of this. Which now kind of makes me want Agatha to run into him again just to see his reaction. And I like how he even mentions Billy and Tommy, the mind reader and the speedster when they're talking about what happened during WandaVision, because we had the Halloween scene where he was running around really quickly with all of them as well. I'm surprised he didn't talk more about the powers, especially when Billy was kind of pushing on him if anything happened to him after the hex, because, you know, Billy has powers now, so he's wondering if maybe he did, because that would be kind of funny if they gave him speed powers just to have Ralph Boner running around with Quicksilver powers, but he's not Quicksilver. Honestly, would have fully seen that happening in this show, though, because Marvel has pulled stuff like that before, and I could have seen it. It's kind of funny how they're using Ralph Boner as the one to give us more of these details, too, like how Sword used Vision for parts, Wanda's dead, the twins disappeared, and how he thinks they got sucked up into the red bubble, which is exactly what they did. It's kind of like that one character that's just giving us all the details about what we saw in WandaVision, again, but in his own words. But that whole situation was kind of funny. Again, never thought Ralph Boner would come back. It was fun to see him come back, though, and I feel like it's not the last time we'll see him. I feel like he'll come back again. Like, you can't have Evan Peters come into the MCU and then never see him again. Let's continue on with the episode because so much more happened. Then we pick up with Billy in his room listening to Lorna Woo's Witch's Road. So he was a fan of her, even having her posters in his room. So again, all ties back into the fact that he was meant to be in this coven. Like, piece after piece after piece, it all ties him into all of everything else. And he was looking for Agatha this entire time. His plan was to find Agatha Harkness to get to the Witch's Road. He was looking her up on Google, the Salem witch trials, finding out all these images of her in different time periods online. Even found an article that said she was in the Titanic, and she was the only survivor for the Witch's Road. So I want to know who wrote that down. Like, how did they know that? It must have been another witch. And as soon as I figured he was on the Witch's Road trying to figure out what he wanted to do, I'm like, holy shit, he's going to the Witch's Road to get Tommy. Because we know Wanda's dead, but she still exists in this universe, and Vision still exists in this universe. However, Tommy, we don't know where he is. They really focused on Tommy's name when they were listening to the Witch's Road, so they want us to know that he's going for that, and they confirm it by the end of the episode, where Agatha's kind of playing with him. She wants to know what Billy Maximoff wants at the end of the road. It's not magic, because he has that. To find Wanda, to find Vision.
There's two of you! You're after Toby!
I can sense him, I just can't find him.
So either Tommy's soul found another body already, or the soul is wandering adrift, and Billy can sense that and wants to bring his brother to the real world. So that would be pretty awesome if that's what's the case. I'm very curious to see if we're going to get Tommy at the end of the series now, because a lot of us thought it was going to be Wanda. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. However, I still have a feeling she might show up at some point. Anyways, I got ahead of myself there. Let's talk about the Agatha stuff in Westview, because I love how we see Billy's point of view of everything that we saw in the first episode of this show. Having him go to Agatha's house, looking at Wanda's empty lot. He has a spell book to release Agatha, because that's how he thinks he's going to be able to do it. Then when he's breaking into Agatha's home, we see the opposite view of her dream state she's in. He's looking for her locket and able to break her out. And then that's when Agatha hears him, goes upstairs, finds him, and he just has no idea what's going on, freaks out. He's just a nice kid and just runs away, which I thought was hilarious. He's like apologizing, trying to get out of there, but then he gets stopped by Sharon. When he gets brought into Agatha's house for the interrogation, Agatha is wearing a Boner family reunion shirt because she took over Ralph Boner's home, so it's all his stuff that's in there. And I did not put two and two together when we started this series that she was still in Ralph Boner's home, so I think it's kind of funny that she took over it. He left because he was terrified of her because she was under the spell. She had no idea where she was living. And it's funny because when we were watching her in that dreams in the first episode, the whole cop scene seems so much more dramatic, like more intense. When it's Billy's POV, it's just a meme. It doesn't make any sense. She looks like a joke, and it's hilarious to watch. This was probably my favorite moment of the scene, is her talking as she's the cop in a t-shirt with a fake gun on her, and Billy's just like, what's going on? Even talking about how she typecasted him as a kid that's up to no good, even though he's just being nice sitting there. And it shows us how the locket got to the front door as well, because when she goes to throw him in his cell, he drops on the ground in the front door. So kind of all tying back into the events that played out in the first episode was because of these little moments here. And when we get to the point where he was revealing his name, he says that his name is William Kaplan, and then when she looked confused, he straight up says Billy Maximoff. So he realizes that the sigil is on him, which again, they did not explain who made the sigil. He's been trying to figure it out the entire time, but I originally thought that the sigil was put on him after Wanda died at Wundagore. So the fact that this happened 3 years before all of that really kind of makes you question, was it Billy? Was it Billy's soul? Was it someone else? Who's really doing this? Because if Wanda knew her son was out there this entire time, there would have been literally no point for Multiverse of Madness. But now we're back at the road, and Agatha gets out of the swamp. No Jen and Lilia. Billy is playing with the sigil and crushes it, which could be the moment he releases the sigil on himself. And I love how Agatha had a feeling since she met him that he was Billy, but never knew for sure. Even saying that he has the same tell as his mother, but didn't actually mention what that tell was. So if you picked up what that was, let me know down in the comments. And I love how when he's like, I'm not like you, Agatha's like, well, where have I heard that before? Which is Wanda and everything that happened during WandaVision. So I'll tie back into the mother-son aspect of all of this, where he's just like his mother in so many ways. Agatha is going to have all the fun in the world playing with him while he tries to get through this. Because he said he doesn't need her anymore for the Witch's Road, but then he can't use his powers, so he needs her. And I really do like the part where she's proud of him because he's a witch. He took an opportunity to survive the hex, and he put his soul in a body that had no more soul after Billy Kaplan died. And he's been doing what witches have been doing this entire time for centuries, and that's to survive. So it's all tying back into he is a witch. He's supposed to be there, and also he's supposed to be part of the coven. So a lot of fun. I really like how they're playing Billy in this so far. I really like what they're doing with Agatha, because even though she is the bad guy, where I do kind of feel like this might be a semi-redemption arc where she does get better. She's not fully evil. She's not going to be fully good, but she's not evil. Billy might be the one to make her better now. She knows it's Wanda's son. She knows it's not hers, but at the same time, I think she has some kind of respect for him, where she sees what he's been able to do and wants to see how much further he can go. Where, hey, this could be her trying to steal his power for her own, knowing that he's strong. He might be too strong for her, where he can resist her power-absorbing magic, possibly release the magic she's taken. Because what we've noticed in this episode as well is that they say that Lilia and Jen are dead. I don't fully believe that. I don't really think they're dead, because I'm pretty sure we've seen them in more scenes in the trailers. We didn't see Rio this episode. Alice apparently died last episode. So if Rio is really death, she brought Alice to the underworld. And if Lilia and Jen are now dead, I guess she's going to be doing the same. But they never mentioned that Rio wasn't there. They started walking away, and it was only the two of them. So they haven't been able to explain yet that they're missing one character. But again, Rio might not actually supposed to be there. She might have just came there to collect the dead, because that's where Mrs. Hart died. Where a couple episodes ago, I said that she came out of Mrs. Hart's grave, and that was kind of suspicious. This could be why she came out of it, because she is death. She came to collect her body, and she's going to be on the Witch's Road to collect the other one. They're kind of doing a bunch of twists and turns here, so I'm very curious to see what they're going to do as Billy goes to the end of the road to get his brother back. Because that's what his plan is, and he wants to find Tommy, which either we're going to get Tommy at the end of the Witch's Road, or Billy's going to find out where he is, and then possibly get a post-credit scene at the end of the series of him going to find Tommy. And possibly another project down the road teasing more of the Young Avengers with Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, Cassie Lang. So we got so much to go from still. Like, there's a bunch of things that have to happen, and I'm very curious to see how they're going to play this. Now, in the comics, when it comes to Billy and Tommy was an offender at a high-security detention facility for superpowered juvenile offenders in a Young Avengers comics. And then when the Young Avengers stumbled upon him, Stature, aka Cassie Lang, noted that Tommy and Billy could be twins when they released him from his cell, and he went with them. And then later they both found out that their mom was Wanda, the Scarlet Witch. And then eventually they go on the search for her, and there's a big comic run where they go to search for her. There is a moment in that run, they're at Mount Wundagore looking for her. So hey, this could tie back into Multiverse of Madness, where Tommy and Billy go to look for their mother, and they go back to Mount Wundagore where she died apparently, and possibly search for clues of what happened to her. So there's honestly a lot of stuff that were set up in this. Still a bunch of big mysteries, because Mephisto might be involved, Rio's most likely death, and Billy is here to find his brother. We don't know what happened to Lilia and Jen, but at the same time, Billy was supposed to be in the Coven the entire time, and there's no way they're killing off his character, so Billy and Agatha are probably going to make it to the end of the road. And you know what? Now that I'm saying this out loud, what if Agatha's road at the end of the road is bringing back the Coven, trying to redeem herself for her past mistakes, where she was the only one that got out of the Witch's Road alive, and her whole Coven died, where this time, she's going to save her Coven instead of trying to get her power back, and more of a selfless ordeal. I'm very curious to see what they do. Agatha All Along is, again, surprisingly been like a great series. I wasn't expecting it to be this good. I've had a great time watching it so far, and ironically, it's been better than some of the other series we've gotten in the recent years, like Secret Invasion. Who knew Marvel could do this? It's a lot of fun. Can't wait for the next few episodes and to see what they do with these characters. But let me know, were there any other references and Easter eggs you noticed during this episode? Because I'm sure it was riddled with a bunch that I missed in the rooms, and I'm very curious to see what other people picked up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot, and you get to stay up to date with all my DC Marvel breakdowns and anime reactions. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week when we watch another episode of Agatha All Along.